Hi everyone, welcome back to Bite Size Stories. I'm super excited for you guys to be here, and I have with you The Mage's Tower by Beth Dawkins. Let's go ahead and hop in. I once was a watchtower. Male soldiers clogged my insides with their rustling mail shirts, thudding boots, and booming chatter. Women, on rare occasions, passed through my entrance. They entertained the men with flowing garments, long limbs, and painted faces. I was aware of these souls, walking, talking, and going about their chores, but I wasn't aware of my own stone walls, not until Mia. Mia wasn't like the men or women before her. Her unaltered face and sunset orange robe set her apart. She stepped across my threshold, and her heavy silk clothing whispered against the grimy cracks in my floor. I knew the steady rhythm of her heart in the soles of her feet, like the flutter of a sparrow's wings. Next, I knew the heavy thuds of the soldiers' feet, the tickle of mice running along in my dark corners, and the scratch of raven claws on my parpets. I could feel. My past slid by me, like sheets of rain tumbling down slate. I recalled the face of each creature that called my walls home, from the largest warrior to the smallest mouse. In all that time, I was a thoughtless creature, no more than a door or boot. My awareness turned and steadied in time with the flutter of Mia's heart. Her hands were tied behind her back, and she was gagged with a small wooden piece of material between her lips. The men who guided her stopped at the bottom of my stone stairway. "You carry her," said the small soldier. The bigger man eyed his companion. "I'm not the one who was told to lock her up." The smaller man sneered. "Scared the witch will make your head fall off?" "No," the bigger man said, as he hoisted Mia over his shoulder. They took her to a room midway up my tower. The cell where criminals were placed offered no comforts other than the wood floor and shallow waste pail. A sliver of moonlight cut through a skinny window. It illuminated the cracks in the floorboards where old rushes mildewed. Once the door slammed shut, Mia leaned against my wall. She rubbed the skin of her cheek against my stone until the gag fell below her chin. Her skin was as soft as the robe she wore. She slid down to her knees. Glossy black hair fell over her shoulder and fanned her face. Her whispers slipped through me, into me, through the wood at her feet, into the cradle of my stone. The intensity and melody of her words caused my mortar to tingle. Her voice smooth and high, wrapped around me as if she held me. I wondered who and why I was. Why was the woman in my walls? What were the men doing inside of me? Her whispers slowed, and then ended as full dawn sprouted from the window. She moved to sit in the beam of early sunlight. Her eyes, the same brown as the warriors below, were wider, without lines marring the skin around them. The red pucker of her lips was large, expressive. "Can you hear me?" The language she spoke was different from the soldiers. Was she speaking to me? How did I understand her? How was I to answer? I had no mouth, no voice. Her lips parted, and she drew in a loud breath. "You need no mouth. You only need spirit, and of that you have much. I've given you will, and in turn you are to give me freedom." Will? Was will why I could feel? Why I could ask questions? If that was will, I would give her whatever I could. "First, I would see them fall, but it will take more than will. It will take heart. We've not a lot of time. I will merge with you, be with you as nothing else could. But first, I must rest." While she slept, a man came in holding a steaming wooden bowl and cup. His beard was the color of rain clouds before a downpour. He set down the food and drink, and then dragged her to the far corner of my wall. He locked her wrists in manacles as she woke with a jerk. The old man wrapped his hands around her body. She brought her knee up towards his gut. The air rushed out of him in an explosion of sound. His hands grasped for her hair and neck, forcing her down. "I'll teach you a lesson for that," he muttered. His fist landed into her face, once, twice, and then she stopped fighting him. I watched the man hit her, and withered in my own discomfort. I couldn't move. If he'd hit my wall, it would be his skin bruised and broken, not me. I wished Mia was made of stone, and I wished I had arms to hit him back, to grab his long beard and pull him to his knees. I wanted to carve the man's heart out and lay it before Mia's feet. He threw the steaming bowl at her and slammed my door. Trickles of hot blood stained the wood planks on my floor. Red specks from her nose and lips dotted the wall behind her head. Her once delicate face was destroyed by brutality. A brown stain streamed in the morning chill where the slop dripped down the left side of her chest. "We'll kill him, that I promise you," she whispered between swollen lips. "You feel my blood? Take it. Warm your soul. Become a part of my clan." She leaned her head forward. Rich blood ran down her nose and fell next to the stains around her. She whispered words I couldn't make out. The blood started to move. It outlined symbols that were warm, sticky triangles and swirls. All of them glowed. It was like the summer sun warming my stones and seeping into me, as if I'd touch every mortar, crack, and piece of roofing. I realized blood was what I was missing, and it was blood I longed for. "Yes," Mia exclaimed. "We need their blood. We'll go stronger for it. You'll be able to move. First, you must practice. If you can undo these chains, we'll feast." I wanted to show her I could crush her enemies and keep her safe. At the thought, I heard the cling of metal. "Yes," Mia shouted. It took me 2 tries to break the chains. The metal moaned as the links opened. "You're ready. Kill them, but leave the old one for me." She knew I agreed. I didn't need words to tell her how much I wanted blood. The first man I killed was one of the 2 who placed Mia in the cell. He was on the battlements. His eyes squinted out in the distance, as if he saw a shadow. He craned his neck out towards a line of tall trees. A push was all it took. His scream filled the cool air. The sound was satisfying, but short-lived. He landed on the stones of my lower level. I could feel his heart flutter in his chest, and then slow to a crawl until it stopped. The men shouted and ran onto the battlements. "Think he leaned over too far?" His partner shook his head. "Too much drink. You saw him last night." I wanted a limb to reach out and grab them. As if conjured by the very thought, I felt fabric, my skin. My invisible limb, the same one that gave the soldier a push, caressed the soldier's chainmail. I was more than an object. I was alive. I coiled my limb around him, like a snake, and squeezed. His cries turned into pops and grinding bone. He went limp, and still I squeezed. Hot liquid spouted from his body like a fountain and soaked into the very foundation his ancestors had built. Before the last flutter of his heart, I brought him towards my wall. I pulled him into me and absorbed all of him. He left only a ghost image of his face etched in my stone. The second soldier ran. A third of the way down the stairs, his foot slid forward. He lost his balance, rolling down my worn steps. His screams altered every soul inside of me as he fell into my stone like quicksand. All he left behind was the picture of his silent scream, forever entombed at the bottom of my steps. After killing them, I threw open the door to Mia's room. I didn't care who heard. The soldiers lived in my belly. "Where's the old man?" Mia asked as she walked out of her cell. "Down in the kitchens, but beware, the rest of the soldiers are upstairs." "Will you kill them?" "If you swear to stay with me when it's done." "It was already sworn in my blood," she said with a satisfied smile. In my highest tower, gathered around a long table, sat the rest of the soldiers. They discussed those I'd consumed, unknowing of their fate. "Men can't just go missing. They're still here. You've seen the faces. It's the witch." I moved towards them. My limbs were longer than before, and I was giddy to slap them like flies. Before I could strike one down, I hit an invisible wall. I drew back and tried again, and still it stopped me. I circled the table, but the invisible barrier kept the men safe. A scream came from levels below. The men stopped their speech, and for a moment all was silent. I knew it was Mia before they could react. Chairs scuffed and boots hit the floor as the men flooded the doorway. The first 4 stepped out of the barrier, and I smashed them into my wall on the narrow stairway. 2 men behind the barrier screamed. They watched, wide-eyed as their comrades were forever immortalized in stone. "The witch!" hissed one of them as he beheld the faces on my wall. "She has turned our walls against us." "What about the others?" the second one asked. His features stood out from the rest. His hair was a dark, tawny red. "I bet dead." "What's stopping her from killing us?" The dark-haired man smiled. "Not you, my friend. Me. I'm part Lwen. Magic can't touch me. It's in my blood," he said proudly. "You are safe from her power with me." I felt the splatter of blood against stone. My awareness drifted to the kitchens where Mia battled the bearded man. Her once bright clothing was splattered crimson, and the old man was a heap at her feet. A table was turned over, and white flour clouded the floor. The top of Mia's robes was worn, and she had a bleeding gash across one arm. Rivulets of red rolled down her arm, dotting the white flour in stark contrast. High-pitched laughter tore from her throat. She stood over her victim with victory twinkling in her eyes. Her victory was short. Laughter turned into scream. The 2 men from the stairs rushed in behind her. The half-Lwen grabbed her arms and forced them behind her back. I'd expected the last surviving men to flee, not fight. "Do something," Mia hissed. She started to kick and twist. "Feisty little witch. Didn't they want us to cut out your tongue?" the one who controlled the invisible shield asked. His partner took up a kitchen knife left on a nearby counter. "Make it quick, Perry." Perry smiled as he ran the blade along her cheek towards her breast, without drawing blood. She twisted against the blade, letting it nick her skin. Sharp pain was a new sensation. The cut was hers, and my own. Sharp and hot. I scratched, clawed, and banged against the unrelenting invisible shield. I had to get to her. I couldn't see her torn asunder. I wanted blood, but I wanted no more of her blood. The knife sliced into her skin, and Mia screamed. If I had lips, I would have howled in horror. That was until her blood touched my floor. Her blood speckled white flour red, like painted glass, and seeped in. I drew it into me and slammed back into the invisible wall. In my anger and frustration, I picked up a pan and threw it into the back of Perry's head. He dropped like a bird that flew into my window panes. "Perry!" screamed the man with the invisible shield. His grip on Mia loosened enough for her to scoop up the knife Perry had cut her with. She spun around to face him. He drew his sword as she turned, and then charged her. She moved around him, evaded him as if she knew his every move. Her smiles were taunts. She invited him close, only to move away at the last second. She stepped toward the overturned table. The soldier smiled as he swung right and left with his sword. He pushed her back, closer against my wall. She dodged each swing with ease. His smile faded into a sneer. His blade did not slice, but hacked with wild intent. As his blade came down in a wild abandon, she turned away, a hair's breadth before the blade would have dug into her neck. She took a step back as he backed her up toward my wall. The warmth of her body pressed into me. One of her palms lay flat against my surface. He grinned. I let her into me, as I had the other men, but I didn't consume her. She moved through my stone and came out behind him. His sword came down, hitting my wall, and I grabbed the blade. His invisible wall didn't stop me. His hands let the hilt go, and he jumped back in surprise. His eyes grew round and large. His lips parted in a gasp as Mia plunged her blade into his back. She tore the knife from his back, reared back, and stabbed again. He cried out in pain and twisted around, trying to grab her. She stabbed again at the upper reaches of his stomach. She plunged the knife in and twisted. His cries turned into shrieks until his body crumbled. "You are a bad warrior," she said in the soldier's tongue. He was the only man I couldn't take into myself. He still seemed to have a shield around him, even when his heart stopped. Mia sat against me, away from the dead man. Blood had cascaded down the front of her once glorious layered robes, staining them. I worried she would leave me. "I will not leave you," she whispered. "You will grow strong with more souls. You will be my tower, and I will wield magic against these men from your walls." Ripples of delight ran through her and coursed through me. I'd once been a watchtower, but now I was her tower, the witch's tower. "I'm a mage," she said, as she tipped her head back against my wall. "And you're my tower." All right, what an interesting one. Hey guys, I really enjoyed reading with you, and I hope you come back for next week's reading.